Through an extensive 36-hole redesign led by Mike Cocking and his team at OCM, Peninsula Kingswood has emerged as one of the most impressive golf clubs in Australia. Both the North and South courses are climbing Australian and international course rankings at a relentless pace. Here on All 18, Mike provides insights into the work that was completed and offers some of the best strategies to play the more recognised of the two courses on property. This is All 18 at the Peninsula Kingswood North Course.
There's a great line by Donald Ross that talks about his ideal starting holes as being a bit like a firm handshake. No pushover, but at the same time not so gruelling that it might sour golfers. It's a pretty good description for the first hole of the North Course. This is a medium length par 4, somewhere around 380 yards. But we built a flat section on the putting green just behind the tee, which means it can be stretched to 410 or 420 in a tournament. The tee shot is fairly wide and narrows around the bunkers. So the conservative plays an iron shot short of the right-hand trap, and that leaves a mid to short iron into an elevated green. You can take a driver just to leave a small pitch, but it also brings in the chance of a double, with thick scrub left and right. My favourite feature on the green is the kicker slope we built in the back left corner, just where the shadow is falling across the green. Being elevated, it can be difficult to stop your ball at times on the green, so this can be a useful backstop or a clever way of funneling your ball into the back right corner. One of the real features on the North Course are the set of par 3s, and even though they're similar in length, they all look and feel quite different. The second has all the classic traits of many of the great one-shotters, an elevated tee and green, and playing across a deep valley in between. In this case, a valley full of sand and indigenous heathland plants and grasses. From the back tee, the hole plays around 180 yards, but the most important number is to the front edge of the green. With a long slope coming off the front and rock-hard greens, you're constantly flirting with the first few yards of the putting surface in order to stay under the hole. Land just a few feet short and your ball will finish at the bottom of the slope 30 or 40 yards away. Land just a bit too far on and you'll be lucky to hold the green. The original third played from a high tee, well to the right of the screen, and whilst it was nice to get a glimpse of the ocean, we felt there was an opportunity to create a longer, lower tee well to the left, which is on the line shown here in the video. The result has made for one of the most thrilling tee shots on the course, a long drive across the heath with a big cavernous bunker built into the left hill. The carry over this first bunker isn't overly long, but to the far bunker and the drop-off should have even the longest golfers covered at around 330 yards. It's a fairly tight tee shot with a lot of trouble on either side, so some will choose to lay out with a 3-wood, but from here the green is taken out of reach and the second shot will largely play blind. With the thought of a 50 or 60 yard bunker shot in the back of your mind, the smart layup is well short, leaving a full wedge to the green. For those that have taken driver and want to get home, there are two options. The first is to try and thread the gap between the bunkers. A great play if the pin is on the right, as the contours will help funnel a ball close. Alternatively, you can try and hit a really high approach that can land softly, but sadly this is a shot that very few of us have in the bag. The fourth is one of the tighter driving holes on the north and really rewards someone who can shape the ball from left to right. Only the very longest are capable of driving over the bunkers set into the distant hill, but if you can drive up close to them, there's an advantage with both a shorter shot and perhaps more importantly a clear view of the green and bunker. For many though, the reality is that the approach is blind, but we took this into account with the green design. We wanted to make sure that short hitters weren't too disadvantaged just because they couldn't see the green. So whilst there's a big bunker guarding the left side, we created a long grade to the right of the green, which the crafty golfer can use to feed their ball towards the middle. It may not get all the way into the back left corner, but it will at least help ensure that you're putting for your next shot. The fifth has one of the more unique tee shots found anywhere on the Sandbelt. Playing between two big dunes on the left and right, the tee shot is essentially played into a steep, skinny valley. The shot across the left dune used to be fairly comfortable, but we added 30 or 40 yards to the back tee here, so it plays a much bigger part in the decision from the tee. For those who like to gamble, a long drive over the left hill could leave you with as little as a mid to short iron, but it's just as easy to find trouble and be walking off the tee having played 3. So the more sensible play is a 3-wood to the wide part of the fairway, leaving yourself a long iron approach. For those who need an extra shot or two to reach the green, the best play is to hug the left side, over by the fairway bunker, to leave an easier pitch to the green. it's both a better angle and also a fairly flat lie. To the right, the fairway drops off into a bowl, which leaves a difficult uphill pitch from an uneven lie and across a deep greenside bunker. Some of my favourite holes are short par 4s, and we're blessed in Melbourne to have a number of them. The best ones tend to put a lot of different clubs in your hand from the tee, and sometimes the decision can be a confusing one. The 6th is no exception, and there's a multiple of options from the tee depending on how you feel on the day. Short of the bunkers, up the narrow tongue of fairway on the left, safely out to the right and away from the hazards, or perhaps attempting the thrilling drive across the sand. Each results in a slightly different approach, sometimes easier or sometimes harder. The challenge, of course, is to figure out what works best for you, and this might change each day as the wind changes direction or the pin gets moved around. The 7th plays from one of the highest parts on the property, and it's amongst the most picturesque shots on the North Course. Prior to the renovations, the views weren't nearly as significant, with trees behind this green and down near the 6th tee blocking views of the ocean, so this was a fairly dramatic change for the members. Aiming for the widest part of the green on the right is generally the best play here, with only the bravest, or perhaps the silliest, taking dead aim when the pin is tucked in the left corner. It is of course a tempting shot though with a short iron, and one to remember if it comes off. Many of the world's great short 4s feature a penal hazard, which you have to play close to or perhaps over to gain an advantage. And here at the 8th we have perhaps the biggest, deepest, angriest bunker on the course. There's a huge amount of fairway out to the right to avoid the bunker, but the angle into the green makes for a much more difficult pitch from over this side. Golf course designers can be great mimics, taking inspiration from other well-known holes when presented with a similar piece of ground. This was the case here at the 8th, and there are definitely some elements of the famous 10th West at Royal Melbourne, or perhaps even the 4th at Barnbougle to this tee shot. In the right conditions, some will choose to carry all the trouble and finish on or around the green to leave a relatively simple up and down for birdie. For those who can't make that sort of carry, a small bump just right of the big hazard can help funnel a running ball further around to the left and leave a fairly straightforward pitch. The first 8 holes are where you tend to make your score on the north, with the 2 short 4s at the 6th and 8th, 2 par 3s and 2 reachable par 5s at the 3rd and the 5th. But that all comes to an end here at the 9th, as this begins the most difficult stretch of holes on the north. What was a fairly tight and awkward tee shot that doglegged around trees has been replaced with a much wider, more attractive and more dramatic shot across sand and heath. The tee was also pushed back 30 or 40 yards, so it stretched this hole out from the very back tees to around 460 yards. So it needs your 2 best shots to find the green. The best line from the tee is close to the sand down the right, which leaves a slightly more friendly angle into the green. The contours in the approach help funnel a running ball towards pins on the right, whilst anything on the left requires the much more difficult high shot that lands softly. After the strong 4 at the 9th, we have another one here at the 10th, plus one of the narrowest and most difficult tee shots to boot. From the very back tips, this hole measures well over 500 yards, so it can be played as a par 5 on occasions for the members, or one of the strongest 4s in tournament play. This is a feature of a few holes on the north, the idea of varying length and par on some of the longer holes, both here at the 10th but also potentially at the 5th and the 15th. The original green was 30 or 40 yards further forward, but the backdrop was a poor one and there was space to stretch things out. This green is based loosely on a redan, the design concept where the putting surface tips from front to back and from right to left, and tends to reward those who can bounce or run the ball into the green. The most difficult pins here at the front, where you have to land your ball well short on a small flat spot close to the bunkers on the right. The 11th plays at around 400 yards, with a long sandy waste up the left and a cluster of bunkers on the right, so it generally takes the driver out of the hands of the longest hitters. Whilst in theory it's possible to try and thread the gap up the left, the smart play is to lay up short of the right bunkers, somewhere around 230 or 240 yards. The approach plays to one of our favourite greens on the property. You can play the conventional mid to short iron and fly the ball on the green, but the more interesting shot is to land well short and run your ball through the valley and use the contours to funnel the ball towards the middle of the green. The hog's back is a terrific feature in golf course design, and whilst not that common in Australia, we're lucky to have a few within a couple of 100 metres of each other. One here, another on the 8th south, and then again next door at Long Island on their fabulous 8th hole. It's essentially a domed fairway that rejects anything but the most accurate of tee shots. The Hogsback here rises around 220 yards from the tee and extends all the way through to the green. Tee shots short of this are relatively simple, as the fairway is wide and fairly flat, but it leaves a long, difficult second. With a well-struck driver or 3-wood, you can try and take on the domed fairway and enjoy a significantly shorter second, but the chances of finishing in the rough to the right or the sand to the left are high, and it usually results in a bogey or worse. With driver taken out of your hand and playing into a breeze most days, this might just be the longest 370-yard hole in the country. The skyline green here is bunkerless but exposed, and with steep drop-offs to the left, right and rear, it's one of the toughest greens to hold on the course. Much like at the 12th, the tee shot here becomes riskier the more club you choose to take. For most, the best play will be a long iron or perhaps a hybrid, with the angle a little better from the left side than the right. The pitch can be a difficult one when the wind is gusting, with deep bunkers on most sides and a putting surface that strongly tilts from back right to front left. Those that can hit a low pitch and control the spin definitely have an advantage here, particularly when the pin's in the back right corner. That little pot on the front right was built as a bit of a ode to the Devil's Arsehole bunker at Pine Valley, and we deliberately built it extra deep. It actually has about 3 or 4 feet of sand in the floor, so that for a tournament you can take some of the sand out and make for a really intimidating shot to a front right pin. The north is blessed with some beautiful settings for the short holes, and this one, whilst the flattest, is no exception, surrounded by an amazing expanse of heath and sand. A lot's changed here since I first joined the club as a 15-year-old. Back then, pine trees covered the hill behind the green, and trees lined both sides of the hole. There was little in the way of heathland or sand, and the vegetation was so thick that it was like someone had turned the lights off as you walked down the fairway. With careful tree removal and some encouragement of the heathland plants and grasses, which originally covered much of the side, we were able to return this ground to what it once was, and give the 14th its unique look. On most days the hole plays around 160 or 170 yards, but we built a little back tee on the edge of the 13th green surround, and this makes the hole play at around 210 yards, which is a frightening prospect for most people. This is a really fun green with a backstop in the middle, which gives hope to those who have hit a little long. It's not the sort of shot you would deliberately try and play, but watching a ball roll back towards or coming close to the flag is a satisfying shot nonetheless. For years the 15th has played as a medium-length par 5, where golfers had to walk back the full length of the hole just played, the 14th, to hit your tee shot. It's not like it was a bad hole at all, but it was just a quirky walk. So as part of the redesign, we not only kept these tees, so the hole could remain as a par 5, but we also added the option of playing this as a long 4, from tees located just next to the 14th green. Not only is it a terrific long hole, but it adds some variety to the layout and cuts down on the long walk. It always strikes me as odd, given how much space golf courses take up, that for the most part, you're asked to play from the same small patch of turf every day of the year. So we're always interested to find alternate tees. Sometimes it just varies the length of the hole, but occasionally it can change the line of play as well. Here at 15, we're able to do both. Both tee shots, the par 4 and the par 5 version, are largely blind, playing over a ridge which runs across the fairway, but they open up a great looking second. There's some nice visual trickery at play with the second shot here, as the bunker on the corner of the dogleg merges with the greenside bunkers, and those cut around the 9th green, making it appear as though there's more travel and less room than there actually is. The best line is over the bunker on the corner of the dogleg, which opens up a much easier approach into the green, especially when the pin is tucked in the right corner. In contrast to the 7th hole, which tends to favour a right to left shaped shot, 16 is best played left to right. The safe play is a little left of the centre of the green, where a small bump helps nudge a ball towards the middle. However, anything too far left, and that same bump, which was helping you, now actually pushes your ball further away from the green. The most difficult pin is on the far right side, over the large bunker, where you can't try and use the slope to get close. Instead, you just have to take dead aim over all the trouble and hope that it works out. At 550 metres, or just over 600 yards, The 17th is the longest hole in the property and is a legitimate 3-shot hole for practically everyone. 2 huge bunkers guard the preferred line from the tee, and the reward for playing over these is a clear view of the green and a much shorter shot. Not obvious in the before and after is how we lowered the fairway at the top of the hill, perhaps by 4 or 5 feet, so that now from the perfect drive you actually do get a glimpse of the green. We also built some bunkers through the fairway on the right, not to serve as any sort of strategic hazard, but because we felt they would look good, and sometimes that's enough of a reason. The green is a tricky one to approach, with the hollow at the front difficult to see from the fairway, but easy to hit into it. Bogeys are plentiful from down here, as it's a really tricky up and down. The tee shot at the last gives no hint to what lies around the corner, perhaps the most photogenic approach shot on the property, with the green sitting at the base of a huge natural amphitheatre and framed by bunkers and heath. The longest hitters will try and drive the corner bunker to leave a short pitch, but plenty of trouble awaits anything offline. Whilst the corner bunker was largely retained from the original version of the hole, the wastes beyond it to the left and to the right are new, and they'll catch anyone trying to hit a driver who turns it over a little too much or blasts one through the corner. One of my favourite shots is actually one that's not so obvious from the tee. A little draw with perhaps a 3 or 4 iron short of the corner bunker. The slopes help funnel a ball close to the hazard, and it eliminates pretty much all the risk from the tee, leaving just an 8 or a 9 iron with a great angle to a pin tucked over on the right. Quite often it's a shorter shot than those who've taken a driver, but couldn't turn one around the corner. With the green, we were trying to get a similar look and feel to the backdrop as the par 3 14th, with heathland plants and grasses framing the green and bunkers. And most of these were actually relocated from elsewhere on the property. The green is shaped a little like a love heart, with wings to the back left and to the back right, dictating the strategy back in the fairway. Pin left, and there's a huge advantage in being out to the right. Pin right, and the reverse is true.